You're listening to the Yoga for Balance podcast. I'm your host, Heather Pugh, a San Diego-based 500-hour yoga teacher that specializes in Vinyasa and Tantra yoga. In this podcast, I'll be speaking with inspiring individuals to reveal their stories and secrets to living a healthy and balanced life. Subscribe to wherever you get your podcast for weekly episodes on topics ranging from yoga to meditation, spirituality, mindful living, and more. Thank you so much for being here. Namaste. I am so excited to introduce the first episode of the Yoga for Balance podcast. This week I speak with Kathryn McCann of Hang Zen Yogis. Stay tuned to learn how Kathryn's own practice and teaching has transformed through the years, for tips on aspiring yoga teachers and students, and to learn how she's currently helping corporate America relieve stress, find relief, and feel better in their bodies. Let's start with when you began practicing yoga and what was your why to begin practicing?
Sure, absolutely. My journey with yoga started out with Bikram yoga, which is really interesting because that's not something I endorse at this point in my life, although it played a vital role in me being introduced to yoga. So as you know, with Bikram, it's the same 26 postures. It's a set sequence, 90 minutes long. And I think a lot of people start that way just because that's something that's readily available to everyone in the United States. And there's kind of a Bikram yoga studio in every city. So at the time, that was something that was available to me when I was living in Hawaii. And I was really, really intrigued. The heat was a little hard to handle. It's a 105-degree room. You're in the room for 90 minutes, so it's a bit like a torture chamber. But, you know, I was pretty fascinated with the physical benefits of the practice. And also I started feeling differently mentally and emotionally. And that led to me exploring other facets of yoga. So I like that I started with Bikram, although at this point in my life, that doesn't speak to me anymore. It tends to be a more, how do I put it, jarring style of yoga, or a little bit forceful. And my style has completely evolved and changed since then. But I think it was a good foundation just for me to learn, 26 postures, learn the names and learn the Sanskrit names, and just have a beginner foundation of what yoga is all about. Since then, it's evolved into Vinyasa, which is a more athletic endurance style of yoga. And that was interesting to me because that links breath to movement, and being a ballet dancer and a contemporary dancer, that really spoke to me because it was much like a choreographed ballet, which is my background and what I've known all my life. So there was a lot of familiarity there. And then, and then I just fell in love with yoga altogether, even if that just means meditating for an hour and sitting still and finding the breath and finding clarity and peacefulness. So I feel like the why to yoga for me started off more along the physical realms and learning the postures, and it's definitely evolved since then. And now it's, more of the meditative quality of the practice and learning more about myself and then sharing that with my students.
Beautiful. And so someone starting out with yoga, like you, maybe they would come to the practice for the physical benefits. To me, I don't think there's one right way to begin your yoga practice. We all have our reasons, our why. But I think it can be an intimidating practice and community to enter to some people if they've never practiced. What would you say to someone just starting out in yoga?
Absolutely. That's such a great question because yoga really works for everybody. That includes all ages, genders, abilities, experience levels. And that's really the beauty of this practice. I mean, my parents practice yoga, they're in their late 60s, early 70s. And my nephew practices yoga and he's 9 years old. So it really appeals to anyone and everyone. I think, unfortunately, what ends up happening is that people maybe don't have enough information about yoga and they attend a class and it might not be the right fit for them. And then they turn away from the practice. They don't make it back to their mat because they were intimidated or because, the class was too hard or it wasn't the right style. So my advice to someone starting out with this yogic journey is figuring out, what are they looking to do? Are they looking to find a more restorative practice, which in case they would want to focus on restorative yoga or yin yoga? Or are they looking for something that's a little bit more upbeat? They want to sweat. They maybe, a sculpt class, which includes yoga and weightlifting and more, something more cardiovascular. So there's just so many different ranges and options out there. I think a beginner should just do a little bit of research and figure out, who the best instructors are in the area that personally suits their needs.
Perfect. And you talked a little bit about being a dancer in the past. So how do you think yoga could, benefit someone who's coming from a background like that or is currently dancing or even doing other activities? How is yoga a beneficial complementary exercise to some of those other different ways of moving the body?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really smooth transition from being a dancer. I studied dance at the age of 6 and stopped when I was 30. So it really was something that defined me. And I knew I didn't want to leave it all together, but I wanted to find something a little bit more therapeutic and forgiving on the body. So when you study ballet, God forbid you study ballet, it's not the most, how do I put this, forgiving art form. It's tends to be very strenuous and forceful and obedient, which is great. There's a lot of discipline that goes hand in hand with being a dancer, but yoga is really a personal journey towards self. So it's a lot more safe, and I really enjoy the alignment in terms of having the feet parallel. If there is something that requires turnout, it's not anything super forceful like I experienced in ballet. So, if you're a dancer or you come from a more athletic background, I think yoga complements any form of movement. I mean, being a teacher, I've had a lot of professional athletes, surfers, soccer players, football players, you name it, basketball players that have been interested in the practice as a way to rehabilitate, stretch the body, and just explore other modalities of movement. So I think a lot of dancers do tend to gravitate towards the practice like I did, and I think they find it to be very calming and relaxing, and it looks very familiar to ballet.
I'd love to talk to you a little bit about what you're doing today with Hang Zen Yogis. What brought you down that path, and can you tell us a little more about the art of teaching private corporate yoga classes?
Yeah, then that's a great question because I think I more or less assume that everybody knows what that means. And that's really not the case. So what Hang Zen Yogis does is that we provide customized yoga classes for large corporations, where people are sitting behind desks all day, anywhere from 8 to 12 hours. which can be pretty taxing on the body. You're rounding through the shoulders, you're rounding through the spine. The wrists can experience carpal tunnel just from typing all day. There's a lot of negative aspects to being sedentary in a seated position in front of a computer all day. So our company gets those people away from the desk for about 45 minutes to an hour. It's something that the company provides to the employees as a free service. It's a free benefit to anybody that works at the company. And they get to explore movement and breath and meditation, whether that's in the middle of the workday or at the end of the workday. And the results have been astronomically amazing for everyone, for the employees, for the employer, for us teachers. It's really a win-win combination. So I get really excited talking about Hang Zen Yogis and what we founded, because we really affect a lot of people in corporate America, and it's a recipe for success. It's working. So we're looking forward to bringing it to more and more corporations throughout the United States and growing outside of San Diego, because it's working here in San Diego.
Very exciting. Yeah, I think what's so wonderful about it is that it's right there where employees are going to work. They don't have to go far to get the benefit. Whereas if, you're an employer that's trying to tag on a gym membership and it's nearby, but it's still, that's out of the way for the employee. They have to sit through traffic to get there first. The beauty of this is, it's right there. So I think it's just so wonderful to bring it right where they're already spending their time and make it so fast and easy for them to go and soak up the benefits, health and wellness of yoga and meditation.
You hit the nail on the head. It's really a convenience factor. I mean, some of these studios within these corporations are just feet away from their cubicles. So it's just a matter of changing their clothes, heading over to class, taking the class, and then going right back to their desk. So that makes it really accessible.
And do these companies need to have a specific space? We were kind of chatting about this earlier. Do they need to have a space set aside, or what kind of scenarios have you been able to work in to be able to provide this service just starting out at a company?
It's interesting that you bring that up, because we have so many different variations of quote unquote yoga studios at these different corporations. Sometimes we're outside in the grass practicing yoga. Some of these corporations I've been with for 6-7 years, and they realize, oh, these classes are big, they're well attended, and they end up building state-of-the-art yoga studios specifically for Hang Zen and the employees. So, sometimes we're in oversized hallways, sometimes we're practicing yoga amongst cubicles when people are on calls and, in conference meetings and whatnot. So it's really kind of a makeshift model, but we do what we can and we make it work. And it's more or less wherever you can place a yoga mat, that's all you need. So it makes it pretty easy. But if you could put a yoga mat down on the floor and you can practice in some space that's accessible, then it's a win-win for everybody. I think it's a trend that's hitting America in general with these corporations, is providing yoga amongst workout classes, meditation classes, Zumba, functional fit, right there on site for their employees, which is amazing.
Yeah, I think it really aligns well with this move toward preventative health and taking care of ourselves. And I think the growth of, yoga across the country in the last 5 to 10 years says just that. How long have you been teaching, and how have you seen the practice of yoga kind of spread among just the general population in the last 10 years?
Absolutely. Yeah. I started teaching in 2009. So we're coming up on 2019. So it's safe to say I've been teaching for a decade now. I've dedicated my life to this. And it's evolved tremendously over the past 10 years, particularly here in San Diego. We're kind of at the forefront of this yoga revolution. And I think over time, and California in general is really focused on health and wellness, but the goal would be to expand this to other cities where maybe yoga isn't a lifestyle yet, because, you know, it's certainly working, and we need it in the world. Once people practice yoga and connect to themselves and connect to the practice and start to transform their lives and make those subtle shifts, I think the world will be a better place.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. If you could give people one thing they could start and try doing at home today, a 10-minute tip, what would be one thing you could tell anyone to try at home?
That's such a great question, and there's so many different ways I can answer that. But something that I think every single person on this planet could do is legs up the wall,
Yes.
which doesn't require really anything. I mean, you could literally put your legs up a palm tree. You could put your legs, you know, up the stairs. You could do this on the bed. You could put the legs up the wall. But basically, what's happening when you do this posture is you're lying flat on your back and you're elevating your legs. So you're reversing the blood flow. So it's just so beneficial to the mind, body, and soul. The blood rushes towards the brain. It has a super calming effect on the mind. It calms the central nervous system. So I use this a lot in my classes because people will come to the class and I engage with my students and I just say, how's the day going? And I could tell, oh man, I'm stressed. I have this deadline and this person, we're not getting along. And I can just see the tension and the stress amongst all my students. And I say, today's a good day for us to start with legs up the wall. And that's something that you can do for 5 to 10 minutes. And it's really a game changer. So I think that that's a great way to begin the practice. A few other things, a child's pose, which is drawing the big toes to touch and then guiding the knees out wide and softening the belly in between the thighs and stretching the arms out long as you rest the forehead to the mat. Something as simple as a child's pose, which is also another form of an inversion. So it's really amazing what can happen when you just tweak a few things within your routine on the daily, and dedicate a little bit of time and energy towards relaxation, meditation, and health and wellness. It's amazing what can happen over time.
Now, I know if, any listeners out there are like me, meditation was something I was flirting with for a long time. I knew all the, I heard about and read about all the health benefits, but it was really intimidating. And as soon as I'm a very, I think naturally by nature, fire energy, type A person, very goal oriented, and I want to achieve all these things. So sitting and trying to be quiet and sitting just with my thoughts or trying to sort my thoughts, it was really intimidating. So if someone out there is listening that hasn't been able to quite get a meditation practice going or they're still working on it, what would be your words of wisdom for them?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of intimidation behind meditation. And I think the way that I like to explain it to people is that we meditate on a daily basis, and sometimes we're just not even aware of it. For instance, driving, I feel like could be a form of meditation. Walking out in nature could be a form of meditation. Connecting to the sunset, in a peaceful disposition, watching the sun melt into the ocean is a form of meditation. So once you explain it to people in that way, you already meditate on a daily basis. And then it's just a matter of finding other facets of meditation for instance, maybe downloading an app and listening to a guided meditation prior to going to sleep, even if it's just 5 to 10 minutes. These are different ways that you can take the intimidation and the mystery out of meditation. And then from there, perhaps developing something on your own when you're starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with the concept. Then you're propping the pelvis up and you're finding a meditation cushion or a bolster, and you're sitting, in Sukhasana, a nice cross-legged position, tall spine, and you're closing the eyes, and then maybe you're meditating for 5 to 10 minutes on your own every day, and you start to feel the benefits of that. So I think baby steps with meditation is the best way to start. It's not like, you expect anybody to jump into an hour-long meditation practice that doesn't really understand the concept. So small approximations over time and being introduced to it will set you up for the right success.
I think that's a great point. And I remember when I first started going through guided meditation and with a practitioner in person, and I thought, I'm not a good meditator if I lay down, but at the time I just wasn't comfortable sitting. I couldn't be in that meditative state sitting, so laying down was much better for me at the time. The point of just starting and working toward that beautiful seated Sukhasana or lotus position. It's okay to take your baby steps and to work toward that, to getting to that comfortable spot.
Exactly. Perfectly put. And I try to incorporate meditation. I kind of weasel it into my classes without even my students realizing it. And then, someone might say something, during Shavasana, which is that position where you're just lying down at the end and just resting and relaxing, which is usually anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes long. That in itself is a form of meditation. So when people say I don't really get this meditation thing, or can you explain it more to me? I say, actually, you're already doing it. So sometimes we don't even realize.
That's a great point. People listening that may have, just started to take the journey into yoga teaching. I'd love to hear what you'd say to someone considering becoming a yoga teacher.
Absolutely. I think, it's definitely a trend that's hit San Diego. It's safe to say 1 in 3 or 1 in 5 girls in San Diego is a yoga instructor, which I think is great because there's a lot of different ways to go into it. Perhaps you want to look at different teacher trainings throughout your city to expand your knowledge of yoga and to expand your personal practice. I don't think everybody goes into a teacher training thinking, I'm going to do this for a living afterwards. So I think when you're exploring different programs, it's important to do a little research. Who are the instructors? What are their qualifications? Because there's so many different genres of teacher trainings, just like there's so many different genres of yoga classes. So I would say if someone's interested in becoming a yoga instructor, maybe developing a connection with a teacher that they really like, and then asking them, what was their training? What school did they go through? Was it successful for them, or do they have any advice in doing so? My teacher training was more of a core power yoga teacher training, which was a great foundation. It was only a 9-week program. And I liked it. I enjoyed it. But I think in retrospect, I probably would have done it a little differently, because now that I founded Hang Zen and I work specifically with people in corporate America, a core power model or outline of a class isn't the best recipe for success. But at the time, I didn't really know that. So it was a great foundation. And then, I got other qualifications. I studied with YogaWorks, which I highly recommend. So I think it's just a matter of figuring out what the goal is and then moving forward from there.
What would be your advice to someone just coming out of a yoga teacher training that does want to teach either part-time or full-time?
Oh, yeah, no, great question. And I know because I was in this boat. I finished my teacher training after 9 weeks and I totally fell in love with it and knew right off the bat that I did want to be a yoga instructor. I wanted to leave the dance world and go into this full time. And what I started doing, we're lucky here in San Diego that you can really practice outside in a lot of these different public parks. And so I started just rallying my friends and saying, hey, I need the experience. I need the practice with teaching and the cueing. Would you be open every Tuesday, from 5 to 6, watching the sunset in La Jolla, practicing some yoga? Who's going to say no to that? So
twist my arm.
And it was kind of for a donation. I was accepting donations, but I was also fine with just showing up and putting in the work and getting feedback from people and just more or less getting the experience. So whether that's teaching yoga for your family members or, a group of your friends or donating your time to different organizations, you have to get your foot in the door some way. And it's really all about experience. And then through that, maybe getting hired at different yoga studios, or sometimes they do these donation classes that are geared towards teacher trainees that just finish the program and need the experience.
Very good point. And I think that can be tied in a lot of times to your training. So asking where you're doing your training, do you have any opportunities for new teachers to learn? So looking for that as an opportunity is always good as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think more and more gyms are incorporating yoga into their regimen. Here in San Diego, there's a yoga studio on every block, I feel like. But for people that are in cities where maybe yoga isn't as popular, maybe it's a matter of starting your own program somewhere, which is obviously what I ended up doing. But I feel like there's so many different recipes for success in terms of how to start teaching. It's just a matter of tapping into your creativity and maybe launching something on your own.
Absolutely. Climbing gyms, if you like to hike, if any other activity you like to do, there's so many opportunities to focus in and specialize and offer a unique yoga offering for those different communities.
Absolutely. I mean, a prime example of that is I've been an ocean lover since day one. And something I really, really, truly am very passionate about is teaching yoga on stand-up paddle boards. Now that I'm older and I have a company, I don't really get around to it as much. I'm only doing a couple workshops here or there, but there was a point in time where I was teaching stand-up paddleboard yoga every weekend, week in and week out here in San Diego. So that was a really interesting niche because it connected me to the ocean. There was the element of paddleboarding. There was the element of being outside. So yeah, there's so many different fusions nowadays. And, I love the sculpt classes, although I don't take them anymore. That was another really fun way to exercise. And sculpt is a combination between yoga and weight training, which are my two favorite things. So, yeah, I think there's so many fun different variations of yoga nowadays to tap into.
Yeah, and to know you aren't restricted to working in those studio spaces. There's a world of opportunity, of places to teach, and not being afraid to volunteer your time. I think you had some really amazing tips for just getting your foot in the door, so thank you.
Absolutely.
Final question. In honor of the show title, Yoga for Balance, I'd love to hear how you find balance.
That's such a great question because I think every human being on this planet struggles with finding balance on a daily, on a daily basis. But for me, at this point in my life, finding balance is taking care of myself first and foremost so that I can give back to others. So for me, that means getting adequate sleep. I'm a big sleeper. I like to sleep at least 8 hours every night. I know that's not always available to everyone, but getting sleep and nutrition goes hand in hand with yoga and balance. Are we eating good quality foods from the earth, vegetables, organic foods that are going to be nutritious to the body? And also making sure that we're eating enough, drinking plenty of water. And then also for me, finding balance is making sure that I am developing my own personal exercise and yoga routine. So am I taking time for myself? Although I do teach, several times a day, am I developing something on my own in terms of how is Kathryn exercising and finding meditation and wellness outside of that being my full-time job? So balance to me really means a lot of different things, but I think it starts with yourself and figuring out what makes you happy so that you can be the best and highest version of who you are, and then opening yourself up to others, giving back. That's my idea of balance.
Thank you so much. This was amazing. So great chatting with you and sharing your wisdom with the world. Is there anything else that I didn't touch on that you think people should know about this world, yoga, meditation, what you do on the daily, and what you're sharing with the world?
Oh gosh, I think we covered it all. Being true to yourself, respecting yourself, respecting others, being kind to yourself, being kind to others. Those are always great words of wisdom to end by. The world needs more of it, that's for sure.
Kathryn, thank you so much for sharing your story and wisdom with us in hopes that we can all find a little more balance in everyday life. Remember to subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts and help us grow by leaving a review while you're there. And thank you for listening.